The Chicago Bears thrashed a bad Jacksonville Jaguars team. And that's what good teams do. They beat up on bad opponents instead of playing down to their level the way we've seen Chicago Bears teams do it in the past.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. On the show today, we look over an impressive Chicago Bears victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars, including 4 touchdowns from Caleb Williams, 2 of which to Keenan Allen, finally getting a bit more involved in this Bears offense, but a really, really strong day from your rookie quarterback. The Bears defense overcoming multiple injuries in the secondary, losing another starter over the course of the game, but still playing very strong, generating the turnovers the Bears needed and not allowing Jaguars drives to finish in the end zone and taking advantage of the kind of mistakes that teams like Jacksonville make. But I also want to touch on this idea of like, okay, yeah, the Bears are playing well, but they're playing well against bad teams. So what? Well, there's more than just so what here. It does mean something. It doesn't have to mean everything, but it doesn't mean nothing either. But I want to start with Caleb Williams having another strong day. That's always going to be the story of every single game this season, how he performs. And now that we've seen, back-to-back or maybe 3 games here of Caleb playing really well, you start to settle in with the amount of confidence you can have in him as a young quarterback. Again, albeit against some less than stellar defenses, but he's doing a good job of taking what the defense gives him and then making the kind of spectacular plays that we've wanted to see from him. Because it felt like in this game against the Jaguars, even though, yes, the Jaguars are not a very strong defense, they were better up front than either of the last 2 teams Caleb Williams had played well against. This Jaguars pass rush is more talented than the pass rushers we saw from the Carolina Panthers and the Los Angeles Rams the week before that. And so over the course of this game, it felt like the pockets were a little bit messier than they had been last week. And it wasn't that the offensive line played terribly, and sometimes it was coverage downfield that was forcing Caleb to hold on to the ball a little bit extra long, and then pressure would be able to get around to him and make him have to leave the pocket a few times. And it felt like he did a better job, too, of not panicking, not getting too caught up in anything, and not trying to make the heroic play every single time. Yeah, he took a couple of sacks. Excuse me. Yeah, he took a couple of sacks in this game, and there were a couple plays when maybe you hope he could have found a way to get rid of it, or or the pass protection could have just held up a little bit better. But it just felt like even when the pocket would get disrupted, it wouldn't necessarily disrupt his rhythm, and that the offense, after a little bit of a slow start, got things rolling again in a way that felt like it was kind of getting back on the wheels here of like, okay, they can overcome slow starts and still find effective, high-quality offense. They went into the up-tempo and the no-huddle and got things rolling. And, of course, the running game working very well and hitting all areas of the field. Of course, we're all going to remember the pretty ugly interception that Caleb Williams threw early in that game. Maybe his worst throw of the year, or one of his worst throws of the season, just had a wide-open DJ Moore that probably should have been a touchdown. Instead, sails it so much that it gets intercepted. And he had a super clean pocket. It was a max protection look, had all day to step into that throw, and for whatever reason, just chunked it. I mean, I don't know how to describe it any other way. It looked like my drive off the tee on the golf course, just at no distance whatsoever. A lot of height, but just floated up there and died nice and flat. And it's a bad interception and a play that he very quickly bounced back from and then was dominant the rest of the way. Because if you look at his next gen stats passing chart from the NFL next gen stats, he really only had 3 incomplete passes all day. You look at his box score and you'll see he had 6 incomplete passes on the stat sheet. It's 23 of 29 for 226 yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. But 3 of those passes were throwaways. So he wasn't trying to hit an open receiver. But other than, you take away the 3 throwaways, he had 3 incomplete passes. One was the deep interception and then a couple of underneath incompletes in the rest of the game. But otherwise, it's 23 completions across the board, 3 incompletions, 4 touchdowns. I mean, he had more touchdowns than aimed incomplete passes if you take away the throwaways there. And that to me is what's so impressive for Caleb, is how well he's taking care of the ball, distributing it, getting involved a bunch of different receivers in this game as well. And if you notice on the Next Gen Stats passing chart, the launch, they have like blue lines that show like the ball path of the touchdown passes that he made. And all 4 touchdown passes are within the hash marks, and 3 of them are from the left hash mark, and 1 of them is from the right hash mark. Like all 4 touchdown passes were dead center where the pocket was on those plays. They were lined up on the left hash for those touchdowns, and he goes straight back, steps up, and fires the throw there. Right, he's not having to be moved off his spot for those plays. It's just in rhythm as he goes through his reads and his drop back and steps up. Like it's perfect timing on those plays. Super impressive touchdowns on all of them. You had, the double fake screen, fake left, fake right, throw up to Cole Kmet up the seam. Really nice play, really nice execution. And perhaps the most impressive pass was the sort of up the middle of the end zone back shoulder play to Keenan Allen. A tight coverage, put it outside where the linebacker couldn't reach it. Really, really impressive throw. And then the end zone fade to Keenan Allen, drops it in the breadbasket perfectly, and then back corner the other end zone for Cole Kmet, who was a little open, but still a nice read and a nice throw there by Caleb Williams. Nice to see Keenan Allen get involved in the way that he did. 5 catches, 41 yards. Doesn't blow you away, but the 2 touchdowns really, really kind of felt his presence in this offense. I think we kind of know that Keenan Allen at age 32 and a half isn't necessarily going to be your 100 yards a game, number 1 wide receiver type guy, especially in this offense when you have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and everything else. But these are the type of impact plays he's able to have. He's such a good route runner. He's open even when he's not open in the end zone, and he can track perfectly to make the touchdown fade ball where he tries a little inside move and then works to the outside so the cornerback jumps inside. He creates the space for himself on the outside for Caleb to drop it in there. Like that's like some security blanket, easy money type of stuff for Caleb Williams. And we just haven't seen them perfectly on the same page up to this point in the season until now, because Keenan Allen missed a couple of games with injuries. They were still trying to iron out some of the details there, and now it feels like those 2 are locked in. And over the course of the 6 weeks of the season so far, we've seen games where Caleb and Keenan are locked in, where Caleb and Rome are locked in, and where Caleb and DJ are locked in. So now I think all the wide receivers and the rookie quarterback are on the same page, and that's a big part of why we're seeing this offense take this big step forward. Plus, you get another great performance from the defense, and it makes the offense's job that much easier, even though the defense was missing a couple key starters in the secondary coming into the game and then losing another one during the game. So we'll look at what this Bears secondary was able to do without Tyreek Stevenson, Jaquan Brisker, or Kyler Gordon for most of this game. Plus, the Bears pass rush coming to life with a lot of different guys contributing from a lot of different spots up front. Another strong day for this defense will break down next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Hims. Your intimate life is important, but your schedule's busy. You don't always have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED, but through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra and Cialis generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for any uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. And if prescribed, they'll ship your medication directly to you in a discreet package for free. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS, hims.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is offering 40 free online courses to help you continue your education, to learn more about the world, to satisfy that curious itch of yours. And did I mention free, no cost whatsoever? They've got some really cool, fun ones like classical music and history of the Constitution and rise and fall of the Roman Republic. But you also have more like academic style chemistry classes, math classes, and you name it. They even have a brand new documentary style course. It's a great way to take advantage of the joys of education without the cost of education, totally free on these online courses from Hillsdale. And also like having to go to class sucked when it felt like you were forced to go. But this, you can choose what you want to learn and enjoy it at your own pace. All of Hillsdale courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever, tune in wherever you are, and you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. I always feel bad that this Bears defense takes a back seat to the storylines about Caleb Williams and the offense, because every week this defense plays well in spite of whatever's thrown against them, literally thrown at them. In this case, add injuries into the mix. But we always got to talk about Caleb Williams and the offense first, because that's what we're more interested in seeing the growth and progress of. We expect that this Bears defense is going to play well pretty much every single week. But I think it becomes that much more impressive this week. Yes, in London, but especially without the starters in your secondary. We knew entering the game that Tyreek Stevenson was out and that Jalen Jones would start on the outside opposite Jalen Johnson. And we knew that Jaquan Brisker was out and that Elijah Hicks would be starting at safety. But then halfway through, or maybe it was in the second half somewhere in there, I don't remember the exact time, Kyler Gordon goes out with an injury that the way he was being helped back to the locker room looked fairly serious to me. So that's definitely a concerning one that we're going to need to keep an eye on moving forward. And all of a sudden you're down 3 of your 5 starting secondary players, and the defense still comes out and intercepts Trevor Lawrence and forces a couple of fumbles in there. I know at least one was called back after a catch, but gave this team extra possessions on offense that they were clearly able to take advantage of. Helped the Jaguars to under 70 yards rushing as a team. Trevor Lawrence under 250 passing yards, and ultimately, Jaguars really struggled to finish drives with touchdowns or sometimes finish drives with points at all. I mean, they only got 16 over the course of this entire game. And that's what we would expect from a fully healthy Chicago Bears defense. So for them to be able to come out there with, again, Jalen Jones and Josh Blackwell in at cornerback and Elijah Hicks back there at safety, these are relatively inexperienced players that primarily play special teams that you feel like, okay, if one of them has to come in and start or play significant snaps, you can get by. But you start to worry a little bit more when you start out with 2 of them in there and then add a third one in there, and your only real regular starters were Kevin Byard and Jalen Johnson. Is Trevor Lawrence going to be able to attack these guys and make the Bears sort of pay for, having injuries and backups in there? And certainly Jacksonville made an emphasis to throw at Jalen Jones early and often. He led the Bears in tackles for a reason, because they threw at him a lot. I don't have the PFF coverage stats out now because the game just wrapped up there, but I'm sure we'll see he had a high number of targets in coverage as well, because they're saying, why throw at Jalen Johnson when you could throw at Jalen Jones and Elijah Hicks and Josh Blackwell on the other side? So they went after Jalen Jones, but you never saw the Bears secondary get really badly burned. There wasn't one of those big plays where you're like, oh my gosh, what is he doing there? And or some big missed tackle that broke things open and had the Jaguars running away. They got some stuff going. They were able to move the ball between the 20s, and they had that touchdown to Gabe Davis in the front corner of the end zone was kind of behind Jalen Johnson and outside of Elijah Hicks. I think that was more like a route that beat that coverage. I think it was cover 2, and it was kind of in that turkey hole corner shot there. So okay, sure. Would that play have been different if Brisker was there? Maybe, but okay, they still only scored 16 points. The Bears weren't really hurt badly by not having those guys in the secondary. They were really able to to hold Jacksonville down and, really hold firm at the end of those drives, because it was so many of these, like, Jacksonville has a 17-play, 70-yard drive that takes 8 minutes off of the clock in the fourth quarter. Or they have the 11-play, 70-yard drive in the third quarter, where it's like they're constantly sort of wearing you down. And this Bears defense was still able to hold firm despite being on the field quite a bit in these games. Not because they were having some tough time getting off the field on third downs or whatever. It was just a matter of, okay, like, yeah, the other team's paid to move the ball too. And the Jaguars are not the worst team in the NFL, certainly not the worst offense in the NFL. They've got some playmakers. They've got a quarterback. They've got a decent offensive line. Like, yeah, they're going to be able to move the ball here, but they weren't able to score very many points. And that's ultimately what matters. Yards for a defense, who cares, right? Points is what matters. And this team, as usual, it's kind of their calling card, right? Bend but don't break, and they're really doing a spectacular job. And a lot of that to me came from another, I guess, surprising feels like too strong of a word, but like another interesting pass rush from the Bears, where it seems like each week they've been able to consistently find pressure, and it's always coming from somewhere else or someone different, and it's always a different mix. And you're like pleasantly surprised or maybe a little bit unexpected, not that the Bears overall pressured the Jaguars, but sort of who did it and how they were able to do it. Like, if you look at, they got 4 total sacks between Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones, and one of them was a sack that was split into 2 half sacks, and they got a handful of other quarterback hits over the course of this game. Again, these are sort of the NFL's box score stats. We don't have the full PFF, pressures, hits, hurries numbers just yet, but just from the regular box score pass rushing stats, kind of an interesting mix. You see Montez Sweat and Byron Cowart split a sack in this game. They each had a half sack, where, okay, you expect Sweat to get one, but Byron Cowart, a practice squad kind of guy that didn't make the initial 53-man roster, gets a sack and a quarterback hit in this game. And your other backup defensive tackle, Chris Williams, who I think has been pretty below average this season, gets a solo sack and a quarterback hit in this game. Like, your 2 backup defensive tackles that we kind of thought of as liabilities up front, not really offering you much, they step up in a big way in this game. Even when, okay, Gervon Dexter's streak of sacks comes to an end, because of course he's not going to have a sack every week, it's fine, but has a quarterback hit in there. You don't really get much from Darrell Taylor, who's had some big flashes. You don't really get much from Austin Booker, who's had some flashes. Like, not every pass rusher is going to flash every game, but different guys are flashing every game so that you always have at least somebody flashing every game. And that's been some of the beauty of this Bears pass rush. DeMarcus Walker gets a sack and a couple of quarterback hits. He has the big game there. Andrew Billings, who's been great all year, pretty quiet in this game. 1 tackle, no major plays. It seems like every other game we see Andrew Billings make some big dominating play. And this one, not so much. And that's okay, because it wasn't his turn to flash. You know what I mean? Guys have been taking turns with that, and that's okay. You don't need each one to be great every week. You just need 1 or 2 guys to be great every week. And this week it was DeMarcus Walker and guys like Cowart and Chris Williams coming in and making plays. Like, you can't count on Cowart and Chris Williams to each get to the quarterback every single week. But if they can do it in the week that Dexter isn't, and that Billings isn't, and that Taylor isn't, and that Booker isn't, like, all you need is somebody to do it. It doesn't have to be the same guys every single week. And you still had sort of your consistent heavy pressure from Sweat, from Walker. Even the backup linebacker, Eamon Ogbongbemiya, came in and got a sack on the quarterback. It was just the way that the Bears were able to manufacture pass rush from different guys who aren't household names and are not guys you expect it to, was really a thing of beauty, and helps then an injured secondary behind them have a much easier time, because they can be aggressive and they know Trevor Lawrence isn't going to have all day to wait for receivers to get open and try and burn them deep downfield. So that's where it feels like this defense is, I don't want to say like unstoppable, but like, boy, you can take players out of the lineup, you can move different guys around, and they'll find a way to get a pass rush from these guys. They'll find a way to get turnovers, even when it's Hicks and Jalen Jones and Josh Blackwell in there as well. And boy, it is fun to watch those guys play. It's easy to downplay it and say, yeah, okay, they did it against a 1-5 Jacksonville Jaguars team who has one of the 3 worst defenses in the NFL. And Lauren, the last 2 games, the Panthers and Rams have been 2 of the 3 worst defenses in the NFL. The last 3 games have been 3 of the worst defenses in football. Yes, that's accurate to say, but I don't think it nullifies the progress the Bears have made, and doesn't mean it's not sustainable or something they can build off of in the future. So I want to kind of look at this idea of like playing well against bad opponents, and somehow that's like not good or impressive at all. It just seems kind of dumb to me, but we'll kind of explain how those dynamics work next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to play daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions, with a B, billions of dollars in awarded winnings. They make daily fantasy sports accessible to all because unlike the other daily fantasy sports platforms where, you have to make a lineup and you compete your lineup against everybody other's lineup one-on-one, head-to-head, and whoever has the best lineup wins and no one else really gets anything. With PrizePicks, they set stat projections for players, not just in football, but basketball, baseball, hockey, you name it. They've got a lot of different sports you can play. And then you pick more or less on at least two players' stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your money. It's a lot of fun, and it just gives you a little something extra to watch for in your favorite games each week. Right now, you can download the PrizePicks app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So whether your $5 lineup is correct or not, they're going to add $50 into your account after you play that first five when you download the PrizePicks app and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL. PrizePicks, run your game. You're going to see national media, but especially like Packers, Lions, and Vikings fans over the Bears bye week, downplay the success that they've had over the last 3 games. The Bears have won 3 in a row. They've won however many in a row at home. Technically, the Jaguars game was a home game, so the Bears' home game winning streak continues. They're 4-2. They're sitting good, feeling good, and everything is trending in the right direction. But everyone is going to say, okay, you look at the Los Angeles Rams, the Carolina Panthers, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, the 3 teams that the Bears beat. The Panthers have the 32nd ranked defense in NFL. Jaguars have the 30th ranked defense in the NFL, and the Rams have fluctuated between 30th and 29th and 31st in the NFL in terms of points allowed, and they're at the bottom in EPA, and a lot of the advanced analytics stats say the Bears have just beaten 3 of the worst defenses in football. First of all, that doesn't account for the offenses, which Jaguars' offense has been pretty good. The Panthers' offense had been a lot better with Andy Dalton in, so their season-long stats don't really quite tell the full story there. And the Rams with Stafford are always going to be a challenge, even if Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua weren't playing in that game. Like, those are still 2.5 quality offenses that the Bears played there. Sorry, Panthers fans. But, it's not like these were 3 totally abysmal teams that have nothing positive to offer there. Like, other teams have struggled a little bit against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They played the Dolphins really close in week 1 when they had Tua. They played the Texans really close in week 4. They beat the Indianapolis Colts the week before. Like, the Jaguars have not just rolled over from every team that has played them this season. Even the Carolina Panthers, like, they beat the Raiders in week 3. They played the Cincinnati Bengals really close in week 4. Like, they're not a good team, but they're not the worst team in NFL history or anything close to that. They might be the worst team in the NFL, but not in it's not like some abysmal team that could Georgia or Alabama beat them. Like, not that bad of a team. And like the Rams played the Green Bay Packers close. They played the Bears pretty close. They beat the 49ers before that. They almost beat the Lions. Like, these are not god-awful football teams, even if they rank towards the bottom of the NFL. And I think the important thing to remember here is that, like, we don't normally see the Chicago Bears thoroughly dominate bad teams the way they have, especially these last 2 games. They didn't thoroughly dominate the Rams, but they thoroughly dominated the Panthers and now the Jacksonville Jaguars. Usually, in recent years, we see the Chicago Bears play down to the level of an opponent. They'll still beat the bad teams pretty regularly, but they don't dominate the bad teams pretty regularly. Just think back to last year. They played the Carolina Panthers in week 10, and it was a Thursday night game, so I know weird things happen on Thursday night, but like, Bears scraped by an ugly one 16-13. Like, that was a bad Carolina Panthers team that got the number 1 overall pick that gave it to the Chicago Bears. I mean, like, that they granted the Bears the number 1 overall pick from that trade. Or like, we've seen over time this Bears team historically, when a bad team comes to town, or I guess when they play a bad team, they'll win, but it'll be closer than it should. And they'll play down to their level. Sometimes they'll play up to the level of a good team too, but they'll play down to the level of a bad team. And to me, that usually signals an average to below average football team. If your team plays down to bad opponents, then you're not all that great, because the good teams dominate bad opponents. You don't see bad teams dominate other bad opponents all that much. Yeah, it can happen if the other team is really, really bad, but it's a sign of your team's progress when you're not playing down to the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're not playing down to the Carolina Panthers and lowering yourself to their level and playing a tough game. You're clearly establishing to the rest of the NFL, hey, the Jaguars and Panthers are down here, and we are up here. And maybe up here in this example is not the Super Bowl, right? It doesn't have to be that. But you could clearly differentiate a team that is bad and flailing and spiraling in the Jaguars or the Panthers and a team that is not bad in the Chicago Bears. And it just feels to me like this Bears team, you need to walk before you can run here. They're not just going to come out and beat a really good team out of nowhere. Like, you have to build that confidence with games like this. And I think if they were scraping by against the Jaguars and the Panthers, then we would be very concerned about what's going to happen when, the Minnesota Vikings or the San Francisco 49ers, although, 49ers have their own issues here. But like when some of the better teams on the schedule play the Bears, you're going to be a lot more concerned. But now you can feel like you're sort of working your way up here. Okay, dominate some of the bad teams, build some confidence. And then, after the bye week, you've got a Washington Commanders team that is maybe not in the Super Bowl conversation just yet, but they're not a bad football team. They played the Ravens tough over the weekend. They're 4-2. It was a tough loss, but like the Ravens are one of those teams that's in the Super Bowl conversation. And the Commanders played them tough and were just a step short of that team. So now the Bears will play a team who's a step short of that team, and it'll be a very good measuring stick of like, okay, you could beat up the bad teams. That's a check in the box. Like, you need to do that. If you weren't beating up the bad teams and still winning, we might have some concerns. But now we don't have to leave these games with concerns about the kind of progress the Bears are making. But now you get a nice real test here where Jaden Daniels is going to stress this defense in some different ways. The Commanders' defense itself is not too shabby and is going to challenge Caleb Williams in some ways and make this offense have to work and step up and make even fewer mistakes. I mean, they're playing pretty clean football, but once the opponent gets better, the margin of error on some of those plays gets that much smaller. So you can't get away with as much against teams like that. And so by having this sort of foundation of, hey, we've seen what it looks like and feels like when we dominate. We've found this identity. We've built this idea of what works for us so that we can stick to what works for us when we play better teams. And you don't have to go into that game against one of those better teams still trying to figure out what works for you. But now you have a good sense of like what works for you for this offense, and you also now have a whole extra week to prepare for the Washington Commanders, who are certainly a better team than we expected them to be this season. You got the Arizona Cardinals after that, who aren't great, but I think when we saw them on the schedule preseason, we thought that would be an easy game, and I think that's a less easy game than it looked initially. They lost to the Packers, and they're not a great team, but it's not a Carolina Panthers, Jacksonville Jaguars team just yet. And then you get one more confidence-building type game against what should be still a bad New England Patriots team, even though Drake May looked pretty good in his first game, to build up that last little bit of like confidence and, hey, we can do this before you get your Bears NFC North schedule in there with the Vikings and the Lions and the Packers and the 49ers, and then more Vikings and more Lions in that stretch. Like that's going to be where we really learn just what this Bears team is made of and just how much progress they've actually been able to make here. Because for now, we get to just enjoy that they're playing well, and it's some of the most fun Bears football we've gotten to see in a couple of seasons now, because you're really clicking on offense and defense. Special teams hit and miss here with the injured long snapper now, and that's going to be a whole other thing. And the tipped field goal attempt that ended up being missed in this game, but Torrey Taylor had a nice game punting. But Bears, we haven't seen Bears playing this good on offense and this good on defense at the same time in a long time. It's the first time they've scored 35 points in back-to-back games since Mark Trestman in 2013. We've seen the defense play good for a while. We've seen moments where the offense plays great, but not in this exact same way. So let's enjoy it and see how well they're able to build off of it, and not get too confident and ahead of themselves and full of themselves. Like, oh, hey, yeah, now we're a great team. We can beat everybody, and then get smacked in the mouth at some point. Like, they got to recognize, hey, we're playing really well. They can still play better, and the quality of opponent is going to get better. So you better believe you still need to play better than what you've seen so far. And that's where this bye week is a great time to sort of check in, self-scout, evaluate, and make sure that everything is clicking in the way that they want it to, and see what they might want to change. Maybe even on the offensive line if guys are getting healthier. Guys like Ryan Bates or Larry Borum potentially coming off of injured reserve. They got a few different guys maybe getting healthier. I'm not optimistic about Kyler Gordon, but Jaquan Brisker should be back. We'll see about Tyreek Stevenson after the bye week as well. So a nice time for the Bears to take a deep breath. But just because the Bears are taking next Sunday off doesn't mean the Locked On Bears podcast is taking any time off. We're still going to be here for you 5 days a week. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, because that's going to be the best way to keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every day. Come on back tomorrow as we'll break down the All-22 film from this game and any other big trends, some cool plays from Shane Waldron perhaps, more about this pass rush and where that's coming from, you name it. And if you're looking for a second listen, you can check out the Locked On NFL podcast as well for more football coverage here in the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. And every day, I always want to make sure to give you another opportunity to bear down.